I named a date in 2009, June 25th, would you know what happened on that date? Because according to the Global Language Monitor, an Austin-based company that analyzes media coverage, the event that occurred on that day is the second most cited news story of the 21st century, second only to the election of Barack Obama as President of the United States. It's a more popular topic of internet discussion than the war in Iraq, Hurricane Katrina, or even the 9/11 terrorist attacks. I'm speaking, of course, of the death of pop idol Michael Jackson. Before the story broke, not many people had heard of the drug that caused Jackson's death, propofol, and even fewer people had heard of the man who, on November the 7th of 2011, was convicted of causing Michael Jackson's death, Dr. Conrad Murray. When Jackson approached Murray with the opportunity to be his private physician, he called it the opportunity of a lifetime. But in the end, it ended up destroying his life. In this presentation, I will give an overview of the Grenada native's journey through the Los Angeles legal system, from being charged with Jackson's death in February of 2010 to his trial starting in September of 2011. We'll go over the prosecution's claim that Murray provided the propofol which led to Michael Jackson's death, and how Murray defended himself against these charges. We'll discuss the guilty verdict, what it means to be guilty of involuntary manslaughter, what this will have to do with his sentencing hearing, and also to put it in context, we'll discuss reactions to the verdict from various segments of the population. First, let's go over the trial. Dr. Murray was charged with Jackson's death in February of 2010, but it wasn't until over 18 months later that his trial actually began. On September 27th of 2011, in the courtroom of Judge Michael Pastor, the prosecution and the defense began squaring off as to whose fault Michael Jackson's death actually was. The prosecution team, led by Deputy DA David Walgren, presented evidence to show that Dr. Murray provided the propofol, which then eventually led to Michael Jackson's death. Now, by Dr. Murray's own admission, he had administered propofol to Jackson to treat his insomnia. Propofol is a powerful anesthetic which, under normal conditions, is only used in a hospital in preparation for surgery. The prosecution also shows that Dr. Murray then left Jackson unattended after administering propofol. The manufacturer of propofol, AstraZeneca plc, says that patients under the influence of propofol should be continuously monitored. And equipment to monitor someone under the influence of propofol was not in use in the Jackson home. To show that Murray did leave Jackson unattended, the prosecution showed his cell phone records showing the various calls he made while Jackson lay unconscious. The defense team was led by Ed Chernoff, and it was their conviction that the fault for Michael Jackson's death lay with Michael Jackson himself. They contend that Murray only gave Jackson propofol to help wean him off the substance, which he was already addicted to long before Murray began treating him. They also stated that Jackson was addicted to the painkiller Demerol, and it was withdrawals from this substance that led to his insomnia, for which propofol was administered to him in the first place. They also said that Murray only gave Jackson a minimal dosage of propofol, and that this 25 milligram dose was insufficient to cause Jackson's death. Jackson must have injected himself with more propofol while Conrad Murray was out of the room. In the next phase of the trial, the case moved to the jury. After 22 days of testimony, on November the 4th, the jury got their turn. As reported by USAtoday.com, they deliberated for less than 9 hours. The question in front of them was, had the prosecution proven that Conrad Murray was responsible for Michael Jackson's death? Was he guilty of involuntary manslaughter? Which means that Jackson would have been killed during a non-felony illegal act, or during a high-risk legal act during which proper precaution was not taken. Their answer to this question was yes. On Monday, November 7th of 2011, they returned a guilty verdict to the courtroom. Dr. Murray's sentencing is set for the 29th of this month, and he could receive anywhere from probation to 4 years in prison. Finally, to put the trial in context, let's discuss reactions to the verdict. As you might expect, his family is generally happy about the verdict. His parents, Joe and Catherine, noted that while nothing can bring their son back, justice at least has been served. His sister Latoya made use of the popular social medium Twitter to share her cries of victory with the world. Several prominent public figures have also weighed in on the verdict. Al Sharpton, the well-known civil rights activist, said he had mixed emotions, that Murray wasn't charged with a more serious offense, but at least the jury did not blame Michael for his own death. The prominent British journalist Piers Morgan, a star of his own CNN talk show, said that while Murray did not intentionally kill Jackson, it was his negligence that led to his death. Unsurprisingly, Jackson's fans were overjoyed by the verdict. There was celebrating and honking of horns in the street, and the excitement was too much for one fan who fainted and had to be taken away in an ambulance. And what about the general public, about you and me? Well, according to HLN, a CNN spinoff that offered coverage of the trial, our reactions were mixed. Their viewership was only up 2% at the start of the trial, but by the end it had risen by 98%, showing that in the end we did care about the outcome. Let me conclude by reminding you of the several stops Dr. Murray has made on his journey through the Los Angeles legal system. From being charged in February of 2010 with Michael Jackson's death to his trial in September of 2011, the prosecution contended that it was his responsibility because he provided the propofol that led to Michael Jackson's death, and the defense countered these claims. The jury ultimately returned a guilty verdict, and we talked about what that meant for his sentencing. And in the end, we put it in context by discussing various reactions to the verdict. The future, it's not unclear what the future holds for Dr. Conrad Murray. His trial's place in history, however, is not.